back, everybody, to Vital Psychedelic Conversations. Really honored to have, I think this is your third time on the show, Dr. Mike Sapiro. So welcome, Mike. Really, really happy to have you
Kyle.
here.
Yeah, I love being here with you guys.
Yeah. For those that want to get a deeper dive into your work, we can post the some previous episodes in the show notes, but just a really quick little bio for those that are tuning in for the first time and may not know anything about your work or who you are.
I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. I integrate energy psychology and Buddhist psychology, and a meditation teacher in the non-dual tradition of Kashmir Shaivism and as well as Thai Forest Buddhism too, so two lineages. I'm a researcher, a meditation and psychedelic researcher. I'm also a psychedelic assisted therapist, mainly using ketamine for ketamine assisted psychotherapy. But I also travel to other countries and do work with groups of combat veterans. So we use psilocybin and 5-MeO, ibogaine in other countries. And I'm also a fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So I help study kind of science around expanded human potential, expanded human consciousness, things like telepathy, clairvoyance, mediumship, just looking at a wide variety of human experiences that go beyond our kind of small contained experience. I think that's probably good for this.
Cool. Yeah, and people can go back and listen to some of your previous episodes. And one of my favorite, I think, podcasts and conversations was our last podcast that we did together around embodying the mystical experience. So I really got a lot of great feedback from that one. All right, so we kick this series off with a question, and that question is, what do you think is the most vital psychedelic conversation people should be having right now?
Again, super complex question. I know we kind of joked about before the show began. There are so many important considerations in the work we're doing. We're really in a revolution of medicine. We're a revolution of mental health medicine as well, and there's so many considerations like health equity, who gets to get the medicine, what barriers are in the way of getting medicine. MAPS has done a really good job when they're thinking about health equity, about training us to think about, people of color in the past have been super mistreated in medicine. And there's a reasonable distrust of the medicine system. But yet we want to bring psychedelic medicines to all people. And so that's an important consideration. Are we digging into that? How about cultural appropriation or inappropriation? Are we doing the good work to honor ancestors and where medicine comes from and traditional and indigenous practices? So all of these questions surface for me truly. I think what the most important thing is, as a clinical psychologist and researcher and therapist, psychedelic assisted therapist, the thing I think about is, why are we doing what we're doing? What are our honest goals here? What do we want? Are we increasing health and well-being and thriving? Are we decreasing things like anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolar disorders? Like, what are we really going for here? Because we're spending bazillions of dollars training people, creating synthetic medicines. The field is burgeoning, but why are we doing all this? So that's like what drives us. Truthfully, is what I think is the most important question.
Coming back to the why. Yeah, I think that is really important.
People are going to make billions of dollars off of synthetic medicines now, and they're going to be trying to patent, medicines that grow in the ground or out of shit. They're going to patent this and make bazillions of dollars on whose behalf, and I want us to be mindful of, why are we doing this? For me, it's about making sure humanity and the planet are considered as primary, making sure that our well-being, everybody's well-being, the insects, the soil, the planet itself, are being considered first, and that these medicines are available for us to transform ourselves and thus our communities and our world together as we move into the future.
Yeah. Well, I guess that probably battles against some of the capitalistic models of creating new novel compounds and trying to have profit from it. So I wonder, what's the balance there?
And there is a balance. I'm not anti-capitalist. I want people to be able to make money and have a future that's thriving, that has abundance and resources. I'm just not for exploitation and the misuse of medicines for just capital gain. I want equal access across the board for people. And are we able to bring this into prisons and jails? If this is a viable medicine, let's say ketamine is such a good antidepressant, are we actually offering that as treatment in jails and prisons for folks? Are we doing our job legally and politically to help people who've been imprisoned for using substances or selling substances now that corporations are making billions off of? Are we doing our job to repair that, to restore that? These are all the considerations I'm thinking about when I look at the field in large. But really, as a healer myself, I'm most interested in healing and growth, transformation. Yeah. So that's where, I come in your program and do some of my work.
Yeah. Well, I guess you've been thinking about these topics for a bit. Do you have any ideas on how do we, get these medicines more accessible to a lot of these communities that may not be able to access it, right?
I'm just starting to work on a project where we're bringing some of our mental time travel technology into some jails in Chicago. And so we're bringing this really amazing, far out frontier science of time travel technology.
What's that all about?
Well, TILT, the Institute for Love and Time, headed by Dr. Julia Mossbridge, who works on AI, cognitive neuroscience. She's mostly interested in human beings' relationship to time and unconditional love. We did a 2-year study on mental time travel and travel technology, where we help people access themselves across time, back in their past and in their future. And when you give somebody access to themselves through time, there's a relationship we have that goes beyond the present moment. So let's say we're suffering, we're not thriving right now. What it does going back and going forward, it gives us a sense of hope. It gives us a sense that we've been through things, we have resiliency and tenacity we didn't really realize we had. And then we're building technology to help people create a relationship to themselves in all directions of time. And it's actually strengthening their well-being. It's changing their actual physiology, the way they feel. And it gives them a sense of positive future orientation that no matter what, I'm going to be okay in the future. But you know what? Psychedelics does that too. And so what we're saying is, so let's bring those programs into jails, into prisons, into populations that are generally under-resourced and underserved. You can bring ketamine in. If you're giving antidepressants, can we also give a psychedelic that does the same thing? Can we make microdosing, once things are legal, can we take the microdosing protocols we're working on and bring that in to places like prisons, where the worst human conditions are there, but then we're using this medicine that enhances well-being, connectivity, purpose, meaning, belonging, and watch how that transforms a system that's generally dehumanizing into one that's actually becoming humanizing.
Yeah. How much work do you think that would take? Because I feel like there's such a way, I guess, like maybe the prison system or maybe just general population views people that are in the prison system of like they need to be there, and maybe restorative justice isn't always a thing, right? People are like, oh no, it needs to be this way. People have done horrible things. Do they need to be able to heal that way, right? Do we give them a second chance? And I wonder, any of your thoughts around that by introducing, say, psychedelics that may foster a second chance or have people develop deeper insights around maybe their past actions, and can they change from that?
Yeah, people have done horrible things. I'm a third-generation Holocaust survivor. I know firsthand, well, through talking with my family, but having my family have gone through that, I know what awful human behaviors look like. And I've worked in prisons, and I also work closely with combat veterans who have done horrendous things in their line of duty and sometimes beyond the mission. And I don't know about giving people chances or not. I just know everyone has innate goodness, and that I want people to know that they're worth something, that they're worthwhile. No matter, I've done shitty things. We've all done things that have hurt people. And the core of us, though, is radiant and good, even though the human being is complex and sometimes we're twisted or we're acting out of our traumas and not knowing how to do things differently. And so I don't want people dying and living in prison thinking they don't have worth as a human being. I want them to know that there is something radiant within them. Um,
That's beautiful.
so I believe medicine work can help them connect to themselves. And that's rehabilitation. Even if they're going to be in maximum security their whole life, they just deserve to have a sense of rehabilitation and connecting to that part of them that's been hurt and pushed down.
Makes me just kind of think about dying well. Like, even if that is somebody is in a life sentence, how could we just even prepare people for to be able to die well, to have maybe some of that life review, to think about how they've showed up, to give them that opportunity. It's really kind of interesting
Everybody
to think
has
about.
worth. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Huh.
So I want them to live, even if they're in prisons or a lot of our combat vets come back and the things they've done are so outside of their moral compass of who they are as people. How do we help them make sense of that? Like, the thing you did kind of was, yeah, that was a little bit crazy and outside of your, and I'm not just talking in combat, we're shooting each other, but people have done things overseas that they regret later. How do we help them make sense of that and integrate so that they could be fathers and mothers and spouses without kind of that hard moral injury? We want them to repair, and medicine work can help do that. So does good therapy, of course. But we're here talking about, like, what does the field need to consider, and these are some of the things that I want us to consider as we're creating programs and people who are going to be guides and sitters.
Yeah. And when I think about accessibility, like, again, like, how do we make this accessible? Do you think it is through insurance? Are there different maybe programs or models that we haven't been really thinking about to make it more accessible? Do these medicines always need to be covered by insurance? Is there like another entity that could cover this type of treatment? So yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts around just general accessibility for some of these populations that may not be able to afford it? And how does the field need to develop to create that opportunity?
Well, we're not going to change the corporate mindset that they shouldn't make a lot of money. I don't believe, I'm not going to spend my time trying to convince a corporation they need to make less or give more. I mean, some people will do that advocacy work. That's not my job as a healer. I hope we have advocates out there doing the work. I think we do our research and we get the data we need to show, wow, and we're doing that. These medicines have a profound impact on well-being, thriving, connectivity, belonging, reducing those symptoms. And then insurance, I hope, will start paying and covering. Like, to come see me as a ketamine-assisted psychotherapist is a lot of money. And it costs a lot to get a ketamine treatment series. Eventually, hopefully, insurances will be covering that. That is one avenue. We get the good data. Insurances hopefully get on board and start covering treatment like psilocybin treatments for smoking cessation, for palliative care. Because we're having great data, that. And then, of course, MDMA is going to start be used for trauma treatment, PTSD treatment. No one's going to be able to afford it straight out right now. It's extremely expensive, which is ironic because at one point is like $10, recreationally, and then they're going to charge like $15,000 for a series of.
Well, I guess it's also the therapist's time, right? You're paying for
Of
two
course,
therapists,
yeah.
and it's a pretty lengthy therapy process.
It is, and that's going to have to shift too. The way MAPS is doing it is amazing, and I'm supportive of that, but I don't know if that's going to be the standard forever and ever. I think it will be for now. 8-hour sessions are really long sessions, and it would cost people a lot of money to have me sit there and do that. And so hopefully insurance will cover some of that. But here's what I really want to propose. All you wealthy people out there who have an excess amount of money and a big open heart, and you want to be stewards of change, give some money to programs that will bring these medicines into people for little to no money. Cover my cost of going into clinics. Cover my cost of giving my firemen and my SWAT team guys who can't afford really to see me, cover their expenses. Because there's so much wealth out there that can be used this way. So I call it Robin Hooding. Please, I work with some people who are extraordinarily wealthy, and And when I work with them, they pay me a certain amount, and I take that money, and now I don't have to charge my firemen or SWAT team guys so much money,
Right.
because I'm already getting it covered. I feel good, and I can give myself for a much more reduced rate to people of color, to marginalized communities. So let's use our wealth in this way that actually equalizes and brings treatment to everybody.
And that's definitely a conversation I've had with like other, healers and therapists around like knowing maybe part of your worth and having charging a price like that for people that can afford that, and really kind of sticking by that, because that allows people to do more pro bono work and offer a lot more sliding scale work to people.
Yeah, I'm being honest about it,
Yeah.
and I'm upfront with that when I work with people of means. Like, hey, I'm charging what I know, I believe I'm worth, and what my time is worth, and just know that some of this that you're giving me helps me give to others for a much less cost who otherwise couldn't afford this. And so it's kind of an ecosystem. I'm helping create an ecosystem where those of us with a lot of resources can help those who don't have a lot of access or resources. So these are parts of the consideration of the field that I'm in conversation with, and here, just like this right here.
Yeah. I want to come back to another topic that you raised after I asked that question, just around the distrust within the medical community. And I think that will probably also be a big barrier for maybe a lot of people wanting to get access, maybe not fully wanting to go seek out these therapies or treatments. Maybe they want to maybe do it with a friend or like in a peer support group. And yeah, I don't know, any thoughts around that about maybe building trust for communities that may not necessarily be so trustworthy of the medical establishment?
Well, we have a huge history of the medical field misusing women and people of color in research, doing things non-consensually for a long time to people's bodies. And that rightfully so creates distrust with the medical system. So a few things is, let's make sure women and people of color and trans folk and queer folk are in positions of power, are having a say and a voice in the medical system and in research, and making sure that those folks are therapists, and that there are communities in place for people of color, LGBTQI folk that feel safe, that are represented. That would be one way of creating trust. Okay, there's someone who looks and feels and knows my experience, looks like me, understands me. I feel more trusting going into that. And then making sure all the rest of the folk are trained and actually have cultural considerations and introspection as part of the training, so that they're doing the work. I always say, in working with marginalized communities, I hope I'm not doing oppressive work by working with them, thinking I'm doing good, but I'm bringing in those kind of backhanded ideologies that are limiting, that are subtly racist or homophobic. I don't want to be bringing those in to the work I'm doing. So I have to do my work as a therapist, researcher, scientist, healer. So part of our program, we're going to be looking at that. MAPS does a really good job, I think, in having those considerations. So when we're really being authentic and like, yeah, there was a lot of shitty things that happened in our history. Let's talk about it. Let's see the impact, and let's correct for that now. Then I think that will start helping make repairs, because if we can be real and true about them and not hide them, I think that's where we'll start doing, as well as all the other things I just mentioned.
Yeah. I know you're kind of associated with some stuff that's been going on in Oregon, and I wonder, with these new models emerging with, like, say, psilocybin service centers, I mean, I guess, like, they're still kind of figuring out the training requirements and the regulations around all that, but it sounds like part of the minimum requirement is just a high school diploma. And, one thing that comes up to me, I always think about privilege and, different professions, and thinking about maybe people in marginalized communities maybe not being able to have access or take out loans or maybe have that time commitment to go get their doctorate or their master's degree, and maybe they do have that healer archetype, but they just aren't able to enter into the system that way. I guess, what are your perspectives around people doing this outside a quote unquote traditional therapy model, thinking again maybe communities having a little bit of distrust within therapy or the medical community, and with these states being able to create this new maybe wellness model, I guess, they're calling it psilocybin service centers. that kind of helps to contribute to accessibility a little bit too, right? To be able to
Yeah.
have these alternative models to some degree, and maybe people feel safer being able to go to a place and staffed with people that aren't necessarily have these doctorates or master degrees and stuff like that.
I tell you, at first I was surprised about the high school diploma. Like, that's all you need, and then you get to
Yeah.
sit with somebody, and my elitism came out right away. I was like, oh, I don't know. I think people need education and have to go through therapy training. And then one of my colleagues challenged me on that, and he's like, when did you start sitting? And I'm like, for people, I was like, I was 15, 16 when I
Yeah.
started sitting. And he's like, how many times did you do psychedelics before college, and how many times did you sit with someone just intuitively help them? I'm like, yeah, right. And he's like, does being through college or having an advanced degree mean you're a better healer? And I'm like, not at all. And so it started showing me my own biases. And this is what I was talking about just a few minutes ago. Part of my responsibility in this field is to make sure I'm checking myself and having people check my biases too when they hear them. And so now I can understand. I don't know necessarily if the education makes the difference in terms of, like, okay, someone with a high school diploma can actually be a deep, innate, wise healer, but they might not have the therapeutic or the facilitation skills. So that's part of what the programs are hoping to do. So what I think now is that I want people to be trained well, regardless of their education level, and have the right supervision and consultation available. I think people need the internal experience of knowing what a psychedelic experience is like, and have the training to be able to sit with someone, and then the ongoing supervision and consultation to do the work afterward. I think that may be enough. But we want to train people. Like, I'm 25 years in meditation training, and I still want more training, even though I'm
Right.
teaching.
Yeah.
I want to continue my training. So I would hope that we take the training seriously, and the training programs are doing a good job at preparing people to sit in the most sacred role ever, which is like, hey, you're handing over your consciousness and your body, in a sense, because you're lying there. I want people to be super trained to be doing that, no matter what education level they've come from.
Yeah, I think that also kind of raises some questions just about how fast can we really train good facilitators and get that education. Like, I just think about, yeah, I mean, any sort of practice, as you're saying, you're meditating for over 20 years and still want training. And I just think about with like all of this work, like I'm still learning, and I feel like I've been so seeped in a lot of this stuff for many years. And sometimes I feel like I'm just still showing up as a beginner. I'm like, ooh, and yeah, just even thinking about like the breathwork training I went through, right? It's like 2-year minimum to some degree. And I didn't, start facilitating a first workshop, I think, until like 4 years. And so when I hear this like fast paced type of training of like, we need to get people trained. Can you really train somebody in a weekend, or like, even a couple weekends? It's like, I think a lot of it comes with experience and a long time, and really being honest about that too. And I know that's sometimes hard to hear. I think with our fast paced culture, we want things immediately. But this is going to also take a lot of work. And I think people really need to be dedicated to their own healing process too.
All right, I'll be real honest, and any of you listening, you can write in and go, oh, hey, Mike, there's some biases right here. But I am a traditionalist in the sense of, I want people to be trained over long periods of time to do their inner work while they're getting the outside work, right? You're getting knowledge, you're getting skills, and you're doing the inner healing, the inner growth. I don't believe that can happen over a weekend. I don't believe yoga teachers are made in a month. I think that's a McDonald's version, a fast food version, because this takes dedication and commitment to changing ourselves as we're going along and helping other people. And so I would want 1 year to 2 years of training just to be the minimum before we go, hey, sit with someone while they're in this vulnerable state. So yeah, I personally believe weekend trainings are not even close to enough. My teaching partner, Cassandra Vieten, and I, who teach together at Esalen and around, we always, when we're teaching on transformation, we say, take this practice on for 2 years, be diligent with it, sit with it, work with it, watch yourself struggle through it, and then maybe bring it out, and then do something with it. So that's what I would like to propose, but I have no say in all this. So we're going to have weekend trainings and,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing to think about. What does that look like? And yeah, how long, like when does somebody really feel they have enough training to really step into this work? I guess if we look at like shamanism, for example, and those traditional lineages, I mean, it was many, many years. And to some degree, we're also dealing with a pretty serious mental health crisis, and amongst other things that we're dealing with as a culture and just as a world, where there's this also maybe an urgency to get people trained as quick as possible to be able to deliver this type of therapy. And I think maybe those of us have been in for a while, we're like, yeah, like we would love to see this here right now. But then we also think about, this bottleneck in training, like how many people, what are their training requirements? How quick can people get trained and actually get out there to deliver this work like ethically and responsibly and safe?
Yeah, so that's ethically, responsibly, and safe. So if we're doing weekend-long programs and then you're certified to sit with someone, is that ethical, responsible, or safe? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if it is. I don't think it is that way. I don't even want yoga teacher trainings to happen that quick. I think there's a responsibility when you lead a yoga class. And now we're talking about giving someone a substance and sitting with them for 5, 6, 7 hours. I'm okay that you just have a high school diploma, you got out, and maybe because you can be trained. But I'm not as okay that you do a couple weekends long and then that's you're good to go.
It's interesting that you're bringing in yoga up. I was chatting with a friend last night, and they're actually at a yoga training right now. And they've been teaching yoga for a while, but and I think this is where a lot of self-awareness comes in, and maybe doing your own kind of checking in with yourself. They just mentioned like, I don't feel like I'm ready to hold space. I want to continue to learn, and maybe like do some more mentoring. But, sometimes that's really hard to admit, to be like, I don't know if I'm ready to really step into this right now. Can I like sit with myself a little bit more? Can I gain more experience, more skills? And, maybe that doesn't mean that you don't step into it, but maybe it's like a slow progression. Like I think about when I was feeling, 4 years in after breathwork, I'm like, I think I can run a small workshop right now. I'm not going to try to run this big, huge workshop and, go outside my comfort zone, but, really kind of like titrating that process and feeling in to know, okay, I feel comfortable doing this. And also having to pull back and, during one period when I was working with people with early episode psychosis, my nervous system was so overwhelmed, and so stressed out where I'm like, I don't know if it's even ethical for me to host a workshop right now because I'm all over the place. Do I want to open that space up for somebody when I have to like go back and deal with all this other stuff that's been going on in my work? And I've always had to kind of pull back and check in and be like, should I be holding space right now?
That's right.
And that's tough to do.
And, people who are excited to start taking our certification program, and I think in the beginning, if you're not a therapist, if you haven't really done the work one-on-one or with groups, there can be an excitement, a fantasy about how cool it is to be with someone on a psychedelic experience. But there are so many unique dynamics that are going on, and good programs teach us there's the internal experience of the person with the medicine, their innate wisdom, the medicine working. There's the dynamic between us, the person and the person sitting. Then there's the thing going on inside of ourselves as the sitter, the healer, the guide, the therapist. And then there's the fourth dimension, which is all things happening at the same time. All of it going on. And when we're in our space of awareness, we can see all of it, including our internal, including the relational, including the intrapersonal for that person. These are skill sets to understand these various dynamics. And when do we step in as a guide, as a sitter, as a therapist? When do we step back? When do we realize what's going on? In therapy, we call it countertransference. Like this is not an easy task. That's why therapists sometimes will spend 6 years, like I did in training in my doctoral program and my fellowship, to really get the skills necessary to understand and sit and navigate all of this. So a couple weekends, even 9 months, that's not a lot of time to learn all this.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like soft skills and hard skills, and maybe I'm
Hmm.
just using kind of like a hard problem of consciousness, and I'll maybe define hard skills as maybe these more intuitive skills, and how do we really train people on some of that
Hmm.
stuff where it's like, we have theory, we have this, these softer skills, little interventions here and there, certain techniques, but it's also a science and an art. I feel like
Hmm.
with therapy, with holding space, where it's like there's, again, you're saying there's all these other dynamics unfolding,
Hmm.
and how do we really teach that to people?
Hmm.
And I don't know, how do you teach people? I mean, you're really in this space, in the meditation, mindfulness, where I'm sure there are a lot of these like more
Hmm.
intuitive skills, and how do you really transmit that to somebody?
Yeah, so we give somebody an internal experience. We lead them to, we invite them into an experience where they're like, oh, that thing, I'm feeling something, I'm experiencing, I'm seeing, right? This internal world becomes present to us. And then I'll say, now I want you to take this experience and bring it into the marriage, bring it into your work. Try this thing on in a real time situation and note what happens. Um, and then I have them come back and they tell me where they succeeded in their goal. Let's say it's to be more present in their relationship, and they're present here. They go, oh, I'm alive. Here's an emotion. I didn't see this before. Let me voice my emotion to you as a therapist or teacher. And then I say, now go do that with your spouse or your child.
Mm,
And so you have a real time application of something you've had internally. And then we'll come back and process where they were challenged, where they succeeded, where they got caught, and where they were free, whatever. And then we practice that for a while. So in these cases, I'll sit with a student who's interested in being a guide, and I'll saying, watch this experience, then practice that in real time. So what I'm saying is we want people to have real internal experiences that they're aware of and they can vocalize. And that is the actual education, not just the knowledge I'm giving them about what this drug does to the brain, or how you identify something. It's really what is alive in you. How do you identify what's alive in you? How do you use it in real time? And then how do you navigate those circumstances and change and grow? That's the real learning process. That's what I do when I'm with students or patients or whatever.
yeah, yeah. And just thinking about like the training program, so Vital. This is one of the reasons why having a week-long experiential retreat is going to be really important to be able to tap into this. Right, we can do all the theory and didactic type of learning, but I think a lot of that stuff happens in person when you actually have an experience a little bit. Yeah, I just remember even just like breathwork training, just floating around on the floor and watching my teachers do body work. I'm like, oh, what's this technique or what's this? And, actually watching them pay attention to the person, right? It's not so much about, oh, I need to do this intervention right now. It's actually really just paying attention and being able to observe and see how they interact. And yeah, there's all these like little nuances that occur with this work when you're really able to just sit with it and be present.
Yeah, so we're teaching people to be in their own experience and witness their own experience at the same time. So the question you posed is, how do we get people to become this version of themselves where they're aware of the dynamics going on at the same time? Interpersonal, intrapersonal, the whole picture is we train them. We train them to do this using meditation, breath work. We give them information that they integrate into their daily lives. We don't just want to have a program that's informational. We want to have an experiential program where they're getting the felt sense of something and then are able to do it in real time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not even saying role plays. I don't like role plays. I want them to have an actual experience and do an actual encounter with another human being without using the medicine, just to see what it's like to be present, pay attention, notice the dynamics, and then talk about them as they're learning it, and then apply it in real time as a trainee.
Yeah. I feel so fortunate for like my undergrad school, just because like a lot of it was like very experiential learning, where we would have the didactic part, but then we really engage in our own inner work, whether that was through dream work, depending on the class. Like I had this 1 week long class where we just camped out at the teacher's house, and then we'd be outside camping, and then wake up at like 5 in the morning, do a meditation, come back, write our dreams down, do like some Jungian analysis around it, have all these activities. And I remember just going through like all sorts of classes and programs where it was so hands-on. It felt like 4 years of therapy to some degree because it was so interactive, and it was like, that's training I didn't get in grad school at all. Right? It's just like really unique to be so hands-on with a lot of this experiential techniques.
Well, how else do we really learn? Okay, so we learn by example, we learn through knowledge of books, and then we learn through experience. All three are important and vital, and we're going to give that in these programs. You're going to get teachers modeling, you're going to get information, and then we're going to have experiences. And in the end, the mystical experience is a present moment experience where the universe unfolds in front, within, and around you. And then we integrate that into our human self. So Mike gets this amazing introduction to the universe through an experience, and then it comes in and becomes insight and knowledge, and then hopefully practical application. So that's where I think in the end we actually transform, is when that knowledge becomes integrated into the fabric of our own being, into our personality. And now Mike and the universe are more melded. So when they're coming through this program, the hope is that the information melds within their own fabric. And the only way to do that is to have an actual world shift, worldview, perspective change, and a felt sense. Oh, shit, that's what that is. I never knew that. Now I know.
Yeah. Just what you're saying, just a random kind of thought popped in my head, but knowing that you've been really kind of seeped in meditation traditions and practices for a while, and thinking about this concept of like transmissions that you hear about through meditation teachers or yogic teachers and certain spiritual traditions, like how do you contextualize that? Like what is a transmission? And sometimes people can just be in the presence of somebody and it feels like you're getting kind of like those downloads from that teacher. I mean, has that ever happened to you within like your lineage or your tradition or any of your practices?
Yeah, actually often, if you're with a teacher that is just here, very present, and their humanity, their humanness is there too, but it's so infused with the mystery itself, with pure being. That's what transmits. My teacher, Richard Miller, founded iRest, he actually says there's nothing to transmit because everything is always present. What you're getting is a clear sense of what's already present with the teacher. And so when someone is so present, all of the universe is there with them. The idea of transmission feels like something there to hear, but it's really here to hear. Because you're opening up to what's in them, which is actually the same thing between us, no different.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. We might have touched on this topic to some degree, but we've been asking in this series, so we'll keep the thread alive with this question. What is the most vital teaching point that psychedelic practitioners need to become skilled and expert in?
The things that come to mind is let the medicine do its work, trust the medicine, and trust the person's innate wisdom to meet the medicine, but also trust yourself when there's intuition and there's something that wants to come through. Not because you're trying to change them, but because you have a piece of wisdom or intuition that might actually be a part of this experience. Learn when to give and when to be quiet. So this is also a dynamic process. Trust them, trust the medicine and them, but trust yourself too, to say the thing at the right time, but also keep your mouth quiet at the right time.
How do you discern that? I mean, I think this is like a really interesting conversation, especially maybe working with people with some of those psychic abilities where they're really able to channel something, this is coming up and I need to tell you this, versus like maybe sitting with it a little bit, right? Like, how do we discern information when it comes to that?
That's an awesome question, and I can only speak for my own experience and how I might teach this too, because I do have lots of things when I'm sitting in a session, ketamine or otherwise, and things do come up, and I'm like, oh, I want to say this. So then I actually don't. I'm like, okay, good. Take note of that. That's good. I like that. That felt right. And hold on. Let's see if they come to it. Let's see what happens, because I don't have to rush. The thing that just came to me, I can say in 5 minutes. I've been sitting on this for about 5 minutes. Are you open to hearing? That's an example. Okay, I say the thing. Sometimes it's so strong and I know. There's a knowingness in my body. This is right now, and I will just let it come forward. That's trusting. It's about, for me, having worked a long time with my own insights and then discerning when is it skillful to share an insight and when is it skillful to sit on it. That's a process of growth for you as a facilitator or therapist or guide. And you know what? You can make mistakes. You can say the thing and then it's like, oh man, it totally disrupted their flow and it took them off on another track. That's not where we wanted to go. And then I can reflect. That's because I jumped the gun. I didn't sit and wait. Other times you try it and they're like, what? And you see that the thing you just shared has a huge impact. That's trial and error. That's what we get to do as trainees and students, and even as experts or people who've done it for a long time.
Yeah.
We're always trying, and then we learn and we trust, and then we correct, and we get better and better over time with it. That's a skill that's hard to teach unless the teacher's doing it and knows how to use intuition, discernment, and being skillful.
Yeah. When you say, you could feel it in your body, for you, is there a certain sensation, a certain feeling, a place that you really feel that when it's really kind of ringing loud for you?
The wisdom for me comes, I hear it in my chest or belly. I don't hear it as a voice, like Mike's voice comes in and says, oh, da, 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 da. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's true too and important, but like not right now. But when I hear the universe or the Dharma speaking through me, it comes through a different place. I actually hear it like from my gut or my heart. And the thing it says is so simple and true. But it's still my duty to go, is this the right time? Is this the right season?
Yeah, I love that. That's, I think, how I discern too. If it's in my mind, I go, this is mental chatter and there might be some good insight there, but it's really kind of hanging out there. It's being analytical but if I feel that in my gut and I feel like kind of like that churning or like that kind of like sick feeling and this heaviness, I go, there's something I need to listen to here.
And we don't have to rush. You can still take a note. I don't have a notepad when I'm working, but some people do. That's a good place to put that insight, that wisdom, that truth. And again, sometimes it's like, oh, this is the right time.
Yeah.
And I just trust that. I have trust. And I trust if it's not, I will correct and even apologize. Oh man, I did something with one of my SWAT team guys that almost cost me the relationship. It was the right thing to say, but oh boy, I took a chance, I took a challenge, and he got really upset with me. And I actually was like, yeah, man, I'm sorry. That was kind of a gut punch what I said. And he goes, oh man, I wanted to hurt you. And I'm like, I totally get it. I know. And he's like, but you're right. I'm like, I know. And I know, and I'm sorry that that's how it came out. And I did really own the impact, like, ooh, that was kind of really direct, but the truth was right.
Yeah.
And so then I got to correct for the way I did it, but I can't correct for the truth. The truth is the truth. Like, he knew it, I knew it, but the way I did it could have been a little bit more skillful and maybe at a different time. Yeah. So you asked a question. So the other thing I wanted to say, the question you posed was like, what's the most important thing to consider in
I'll read it again. Yeah. What's the most vital teaching point that psychedelic practitioners need to become skilled and expert in?
Yeah. So there was two answers, and I just stuck on one. The first one was trust the medicine, trust the person's wisdom, and trust yourself when you're working together. That's one. The second piece is do your work. Do your internal work. Your biases, your judgments, your conditioning, your habits are all coming up when you're doing this work. Your sexuality, your racisms, your homophobias, all the things that you don't think are really in there are in there. Are in there because we're sponges that take all this information from our culture, parents, caregivers, and it does come out subtly. And I want to make sure we are all aware of it, actually, without shame, like, okay, this is what I've got, this is how I was taught, this is what's in me, what comes through my lineage, my ancestors. Do your work on that so we can be more transparent, more authentic, and that those things don't sneak in.
Yeah.
We don't want those things sneaking in. We want to be clear of them. We want to work through them with mentors, coaches, therapists.
And I think doing the work really means a lot of things to a lot of people. So I wonder how you contextualize that, and what is doing the work for you?
Definitely getting some therapy for our own wounds and healing. Then there's getting coaching, like how do I want to thrive? Where am I stepping into this as like how do I master the art? There's therapy to help with the healing and our traumas and conditioning. There's coaching and mentoring to help with the art and the skill set of doing what we want. And then there's like being aware of our social cultural conditioning, making sure we're understanding any isms that have been taught to us are still in us. So we have to be aware of those. That's a whole other cultural consideration, cultural introspection, cultural positioning. So healing, therapy, doing the work with like our skill building, becoming an expert, a master of a facilitation skill or guidance, being a therapist, and then looking at the social cultural conditioning, getting that worked out. Those are three important pieces. And then our spiritual stuff. Where are we in our spiritual practices? Because no matter what, psychedelic work is spiritual work. So we want to make sure we're also doing the work on, are we on the mat? Or do we have a teacher? Do we have a community? Are we steeped in our practice so it's coming through the way we speak, how we eat, how we act? That's doing the work. I'm thinking of all those things all day, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm checking myself. Did I do those things? Am I taking care of myself those ways?
And another question around the work, can the work be gentle? So I'm thinking like sometimes when I hear that phrase or people say, oh, you need to do the work, does it always need to be down and dirty, get your hands in there? Or is there a gentle way of doing that at times?
I want to say no, but of course. I'm the guy who's, I like being challenged, but boy, there are some really gentle I rest is a beautiful practice. Tara Brach is a Buddhist teacher. Her practices are so gentle. They take me so deep into awareness without any force. Richard Miller's teaching, no force. It's all ease. Dancing, drumming. You don't have to, you don't want to be forceful. It's actually subtle. The movements on the drum, even making big, loud, crisp cracks is not about force. This is actually about us finding ease in who we really are and being loving and nurturing to ourselves throughout the process. So I don't believe there needs to be force in doing that. I think there needs to be dedication. That's where I get serious. Dedication, consistency, discipline, total serious about that. But while we're doing it, we can be gentle, loving, nurturing, because that's what we want for the people we're serving, for them to find that loving, nurturing gentleness, which they can take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So we have to do that and show that.
I remember I would beat myself up a bunch when I was younger, and I'm like, oh, I'm like failing on my meditation practice or this or that. And I kind of pitched that to a teacher of mine, and she was like, Kyle, you're 25. Go have fun. And it reminded me of like, I think kind of our conversations in the past around embodying the mystical, it's like also, how do we just embody being human? I had another teacher when I was just like, I need to do this, I need to do that. I'm like being hard on myself. And I remember he just looked at me and said, when was the last time you played?
Yeah, totally.
And I'm like, I don't know, because I'm always so serious about this work, and
Right.
it reminds
Yes.
me, it's like, can we have fun, right? Maybe the work is actually, for me, being more physical, going on like a long bike ride or getting out there in nature and snowboarding and actually being in my body, because I'm neglecting it because I'm too in my head all the time.
Yeah, I often say this is very serious work, but you don't have to be serious doing it. You'll
Yeah.
catch me saying that. And a lot of my interventions with my patients are going to dance, are going to buy new clothes that represent who they are, not who they think they should be. Really, I work with some like CEO types, and I'm like, dude, I've even said this. You dress really. You're really not expressive. Like, do you find yourself bored with yourself? They're like, oh yeah, I'm super bored. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. What if you let yourself look any way you wanted? How would it look? He'd go, well, I would have longer hair. I'd wear these kinds of things. I'm like, okay, until I see you, your assignment is go shopping. And he's been wearing the things that like fill him with joy and like represent what he wants to look like. And it sounds so simple,
Yeah.
but it's actually about letting that part of you out that we normally lock down because life is serious. I got it, it's like, ooh, no, actually play. My girlfriend says, let's use our meat suits. We have them. They sense. They can sense pleasure. Let's use them.
Yeah.
So dancing, snowboarding, even doing the dishes is a sensual experience once you really get rid of like, oh, I got to do it.
I love doing the dishes.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
the
it's so calming.
And the smells
yeah, the warm water and.
So, Zen is serious until you learn the universe is playful, and then you get to be kind of playful with it. But yeah, I want people to take their practice seriously because that's what's going to help them transform.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And I just bring up the gentleness because I feel like there's sometimes you can get really hard on yourself, and I've done it before, and some of my teachers have reminded me around the play. I'm like, okay, yes, I can be serious and dedicated to a practice, but I also need to bring a little bit of lightness to it as well.
Or a lot of bit of lightness.
Yeah.
I want to live in ease, even when I'm suffering, even when I'm grieving. I still want to feel light and at ease, even when there's grief. I can also meet that with ease of being. And I can still play even when I'm in grief, even when I'm having a tough experience. I can still be playful, even if it's a little bit, putting on a song that I just bounce to. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely agree.
Well, I think this also maybe circles in with the psychedelic experience too, right? Like, what is healing in the psychedelic experience? And I find this too with like some people I've been working with ketamine with this idea of this golden shadow, right? It's like, do I always need to go in there and go into the depths and darkness and do all the trauma work? Or maybe actually some of that work is accepting part of that golden shadow. It's like, oh, I'm feeling this sense of joy, but I'm afraid to touch it. I don't know if I can express that or really feel it right now. And it's like, how do we sit into that? How do we maybe just laugh during this session and maybe not need to go into the darkness?
So many people don't think they deserve happiness or joy or well-being because they were conditioned out of it. Yeah. They might have gotten attention when they were sick, or they might have been hurt as a child by their parents, but that's the only way they got love, or what they perceived. And so grown up, they're like, I got to be serious and kind of afraid, and that's where I'll feel this sense of like, well, here's where I get love from. I'm like, oh, right, you're conditioned. So what about touching on joy, ease, relief? And so many people push those things away, which is such a paradox because that's all we're longing for.
Right.
So yeah, people have to have permission to play sometimes to enjoy themselves. You mean I can have fun? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I joke with people while they're on ketamine, and they laugh. They just, because they need it. They need to burst out of the prison that they've put themselves in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's like an important reminder. Sometimes it's like, is that being unprofessional? If you guys crack a joke and there's like a little bit of a laughing fit, but I think for some people that is like the healing, right? It's like if they weren't able to really express that or feel that, maybe in a family dynamic or just their environment, to finally express that and feel into it. It's like, whoa, I have permission to laugh and make a joke right now, and it doesn't always need to be serious or have to carry like a weight around.
Totally. So again, doing the work for us as therapists, guides, or sitters, are we bringing in this work is serious? And then they start laughing and you're like, oh, wait a second. Should I bring them back to their childhood trauma in this moment? That's discernment, going, wait, that's my thing. That's why, you got to do your work so you know what are you bringing into this session, because it's going to be influencing the work they're doing, no matter what. We're always influencing each other, just being more mindful and conscious about what are we bringing in. And if you think work, all of this has to be serious and heavy, then you're going to be guiding them into that every time too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's an important reminder. I think this is a big part of like holding space and just the work is really checking in with yourself, right? What's coming up? What's your agenda? Why do you want to do X, Y, and Z? Why do you want to say anything? Is it for you? Is it for them? And that takes a lot of skill to really try to discern all that in the moment, work with that energy. That's a challenge. And I think
That's it.
it takes a really long time to even just touch it inside of us to be able
Oh,
to.
totally.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no
yeah,
end
me
to
too.
that because I keep changing and I keep evolving. So my
Yeah.
work keeps evolving, which means I keep having to have an eye on what Mike is showing up today. Which part of Mike is stepping into the therapist, guide, sitter role? How am I influencing this very session for that person? That actually has to be a part of what we're watching while we're also extraordinarily present with this human being who's vulnerable and open hearted and willing to do their own work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is awesome. I'm really excited that you're going to be part of Vital to be able to teach a lot of this stuff. What are some topics that you're really excited to explore? I know we have you on the integration side of things, and then exploring the mystical, which I'm excited about, and hopefully you'll also be part of the retreats where we can actually, be able to teach more mindfulness meditation skills to the students. And
Yeah, everything you just said right there. So I'm really interested in helping people identify the aspects of their psychedelic experience that we want to bring into their everyday waking life by creating habits and patterns and practices that now come out of the new insights that they've gained. So that's what I'll be teaching people, helping new therapists, clinicians, guides, or healers understand the importance of integration. I like the concept of mainstreaming mysticism. And so part of what I'll be bringing is how to really make these beautiful mystical states ordinary. This is already the fabric of our universe and where we come from. So I want to bring the mystical into the ordinary and help the people in our program understand how to help others do that. One, for themselves, and two, for the patients or people doing the medicine. I also want to help as a clinical psychologist who works a lot with combat veterans and first responders. How do we use psychedelics for special populations? Are there differences? What are the clinical implications for using medicine with first responders or, veterans? And then definitely being part of the retreat and adding meditation practices, adding body work practices, adding joy practices, helping people embody and have experiences inside that they can then bring to their students or retreatants or whatever they're doing. Yeah, that's mainly what I'm going to be bringing to this program.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. And just thinking about when you joined us in navigating psychedelics, I think most of the students always loved your presentation there. Always loved you showing up. You're wonderful. Really love having you part of our programs. I guess we didn't touch on any of the combat vet work that you've been doing, and that might just be interesting to touch on before we close out here. To maybe just highlight, how did you get involved in some of that work? What are you noticing? Have you been noticing? Is there a difference with? I know you've been working with ketamine with these folks.
I've been actually doing more with a group called the Mission Within. I've been very lucky to have been invited down to Mexico and some other parts of the United States to work with combat vets. My clinical training is in combat trauma, PTSD, moral injury. Trained a lot at different VAs, and one of the loves of my life are combat veterans, and I work very well with them, and I give them all parts of me because I don't have to filter myself. Those are men and women who you don't need. You just be real and raw with, and that's what I like. That's who I am too. But boy, working with psychedelics with them is an intense experience, especially 5-MeO. Most combat vets, and I'm talking we're mostly special operations, Rangers, Navy SEALs, CAG, Delta, these folks who have been highly trained, specialized in combat and warfare, using almost their own bodies, they become incredible warriors, like the elite warrior class of our world, which means you're always in control. You are in control of your emotions, your mind, and your body. Your body, mind, emotions under your control to do a very difficult task efficiently. So you give them 5-MeO and you have no control. You are blasted out of your senses, out of your mind, out of your reality. And there are some intense reactions. Before you get to meet God, you have to let go of all the limitations and conditions and ideas of who you think you are. And you get a combat vet who's trained not to do that. And you give them an experience like 5-MeO. It is extraordinarily and intense to be with them while they're fighting against that.
Do you feel like that's a pretty potent medicine for people with PTSD? Like that it is really hard to let go. It might be way overwhelming for the nervous system versus like using something like MDMA?
Sure, yeah, my gosh, but well, that tends to be the end of the weekend, so we might do MDMA, we might do psilocybin, and we might do ibogaine for all different reasons, for different uses. And then they're given 5-MeO because they're already open a bit more, they're more receptive and willing. And it's my favorite time, actually, just to watch it happen. And it's an almost instant transformation of a human being to be stripped of all their identities and control. And after the fight, they're like, they either needed to scream and let out the rage that was in them. They needed to scream and let go of this illusion of control because we don't have it anyway. And especially for PTSD, I have it myself. Control is important because we want to keep ourselves safe in the world, And it's really scary to not have control. The nervous system's like, oh, please get back in that little prison I've created for you so you feel like you're safe. But that's not real safety. And once you finally see and let go and have some surrender to the universe, we can start feeling safe in the universe again. And that's what we really need. Sometimes it takes blasting us out of our comfort zone, literally, to recognize we're held. We're held.
Mentioning being safe in the universe, I wonder how much of that comes up, like that type of phrasing comes up with some of your clients with trauma. It's come up, I think, a few times with some clients in the past for me of like, this bad thing has happened to me and I don't trust the universe at all, right? Like it doesn't feel like a safe place because this happened to me. And I wonder, is that part of the healing for people, actually developing some sort of trust or safety within this whole universal scheme of life and being here?
Totally. Bad things do happen. They're not wrong. They just have a very limited belief system. A belief system that I can't trust will get you to a place of thinking you're safe, even though you really know you're not. You still will never feel. So it's a paradox. You have to trust.
Right.
So practices like iRest and other meditations where we learn to build safety with ourselves first. At least do I have my own back? Start with that. Before I let the universe, I'm going to dissolve into the universe and just be held. That takes a lot of courage. That's why these medicines get us there really quickly and show us a truth that we actually are held by the universe, even though bad things do happen. No minimizing of that, no invalidating, but the belief set keeps us limited and locked in our own prison. And we have to sometimes blast people out of that prison to show your belief is not actually true. It's partially true, but not fully true. But we also need to make sure through a practice that's sustainable that we have our own backs. We feel safe within ourselves. We learn to trust and make good decisions within ourselves. And then we can see, no, I do trust some other people. And eventually I'm going to surrender and trust the universe itself. And that's where I would love people to end up being, but it is a process. But
yeah, it takes
things
time.
like 5-MeO just blow you out.
Blow you out there, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, Mike. Well, we're heading at the end here. Anything that you want to close with? Anything that we didn't touch on? Anything that's just kind of still floating around in your mind?
Well, the why in the very beginning. Why do this? And for me, it's about, my motto is personal awakening for the sake of collective transformation. And these medicines really give us a touch of our innate wholeness. And it brings unconditional love to us, which always is there for us. And my hope is that all of us touch on the unconditional love that's here for us, within us, for us. And once you touch that, you can't not offer it.
Yeah.
You can't not take care of other things. So this medicine work wakes us up to the field of love in which we live, which is surrounds us. And once you touch that, you can't help but offer it to other people, to animals, to plants, to the planets, to the planet, to planets, to the cosmos. So this work gives us access to what's already fundamentally true and helps us bridge that with everything else. So that's my hope of this work.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love your why. And
Thanks,
yeah,
Kyle.
I think that's an important question for anybody getting involved. You know, why are you getting involved? I always think it was the guy Simon, I forget his last name, but yeah, has a whole book. Start with why. What is your why here?
So I wanted to end with the why too.
I love it. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Anything that's going on in your world that you want to pitch, whether it's like social media where people can find you or any events coming up besides, Vital that you'll be part of?
I always say people will find me if they want to find me.
Cool.
I do all kinds of stuff, all services, and people will find me if they want to find me.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Mike Sapiro, thank you for being part of Vital Psychedelic Conversations, and thank you everybody for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks so much. Take care.